Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Laura Barrera. I'm one of the residents currently on the RAMS Board of Directors. We have four fantastic physicians who are here to talk to us about strategies on securing an administration fellowship, all the questions that you would want to know, and everything on how to get on this path of leadership. We currently have Dr. Wendy Sun, Dr. Monisha Dilip, Dr. Stephanie Gopal, and Dr. Hope Tate. I want to take just a few minutes just to have each of them introduce themselves and give themselves a little bit of a background on and how they got to us. So if we want to start with Dr. Wendy Sun, that'd be great.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Wendy Sun. I'm a first-year admin fellow at Yale New Haven Health. I did my residency at Yale as well. And kind of my pathway to doing administration is I really had affinity towards leadership and in making an impact and being in the room and being part of discussions. And part of that is also working with Laura on the RAMS board and being the resident member on the board of directors for SAEM, and kind of translating that to where I was practicing at a local level. I found that I really was interested in clinical operations as well as improving patient outcomes through patient quality and safety. And that is all in line with what we do daily as an admin and clinical operations fellow. And so I knew that was a fellowship I wanted to pursue. And so far, it's been an awesome journey. As right now, I'm also currently getting my MBA with the Yale School of Management. And with that, I'll pass it on to Dr. Monisha Dilip.
Hey everybody, I'm Monisha Dilip. I am the second year admin fellow at Yale with Wendy. I started my journey, I was a resident at Kings County Hospital, SUNY Brooklyn, in Brooklyn, New York. I basically started my interest in admin kind of my first and second year of residency. I got more involved in projects at that time. And then as COVID hit, I think that kind of exposed a lot of operational gaps and highlighted a lot of issues, and that kind of brought up a lot more things that made me interested in, as Wendy said, wanting to be a part of the discussions and wanting to be a part of, being in the room for these discussions and wanting to change things. So I started hopping on more projects and getting more involved, and that led me to basically applying for admin. I also was one of the admin chief residents along with some of the other speakers here today. And that also kind of helped develop my interest as we kind of formed our projects. And then currently as an admin fellow, I'm also getting my MBA at Yale. I'll be finishing in 1.5 months. Very excited for that. And currently working on a lot of projects, both operationally, which is incredibly interesting, kind of looking at how various operational factors are influenced by various metrics in the hospital, in the emergency department, but also looking at various quality aspects of the emergency department and really getting kind of a well-rounded view of admin. But another particular interest I have is in wellness and administration, and that's something that I really like to develop, especially as it's something that we've definitely seen become an issue with emergency physicians. And with that, I'll pass it to Dr. Gopal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Gopal. I am an second year administrative fellow at NYU in the Healthcare Leadership and Operations Fellowship. I completed my residency at Kings County with Monisha, and I was a chief resident there. And my journey to admin was quite late. So if you decide late, it is very much still possible. And really, it was sort of doing a chief year. I always knew I wanted to be in a leadership role, and I hadn't quite figured out what I wanted that to look like. And then during my chief year, it helped to really sort of formulate that path a little bit more with some great mentorship. And I kind of learned that I had been doing sort of administrative projects all along, probably without really identifying it or naming it. But yeah, so that's, in the fellowship at NYU, and it comes with an MPA degree, which I'm sure I'll share more about later.
And Dr. Tate.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Hope Tate. I am the Director of Quality and Patient Safety at Kings County. I am completing my second year of my admin fellowship at Kings County as well, which goes along with a MBA degree, which we'll probably all touch on as sort of the questions go down. But a little about me: I am born and trained in Brooklyn. I completed an emergency medicine and internal medicine residency at Kings County, where I also was chief resident along with some of the others on this call. And I think, I really got interested in admin from the quality improvement perspective. There were some great mentors who got me sort of involved in projects. And similar to some of the statements that other presenters have said, is we all probably had the skill set previously. We just didn't know that it was admin. And being able to sort of use those skills and put a label on it and channel it towards a career, sort of how I've got onto this route of doing admin. So now I'm really just interested in improving the type of care that we give patients and working on performance improvement projects and mentorship for other future admin people. So excited to talk with you all tonight.
Thank you all so much. It's very refreshing to hear the various paths that you have taken to try and get to where you're currently at in regards to your fellowship. Can you discuss some of the various leadership paths that are available for emergency medicine administration, specifically for women, or anyone, but specifically for women as well, and how your fellowships, the ones that you're currently in, or ones that you know of, how they support your trajectory in these fellowships?
So I think one of the big things is that there's a ton of different fellowships out there. And that's something that's very important to keep in mind. There's 1-year fellowships and 2-year fellowships within admin, and they can have a variety of different flavors. Some kind of focus in operations, some focus in quality, and some are more academic than others. And some are more focused on kind of very much, they're more, CMG based, and they're kind of rooted in that as well. And some of them come with degrees as well. And there's kind of like a variety in terms of the funding for those degrees. And so these are all very important things to keep in mind when you're looking at fellowships, to see what exactly you're looking for when it comes to the type of degree you're interested in, if you're interested in a degree at all, and in terms of the funding that the program would provide. And I think that those are all very important considerations that I had when I was personally looking for a fellowship. But I think one of the biggest things that drew me to my current fellowship was not only the degree, not only the opportunities, but the mentorship opportunities here was a large part of what made me choose Yale. And I think that's something that is very important to keep in mind when you're looking at fellowships, is making sure that you have a solid mentor in whatever place that you choose. And that's something that I think is very important for us to consider as women too, because I think that it's sometimes a little bit harder to find somebody who you feel is going to kind of bring you up. And personally, I feel like a very good thing to kind of have your voice heard is to have that mentor that'll kind of like help pull you into all of these rooms and get you on all these projects. And that was a huge thing when I was considering fellowships. Yeah, that was my personal experience.
And I can just add in terms of paths afterwards, I think, when I was interviewing and a lot of people asked me that question, I was like, oh, well, I'd be like happy being a medical director, an assistant medical director. And I actually had a lot of people tell me like, no, you should dream big, and you really have a large number of jobs you can take depending on what your interests are, right? And what you want to do, whether you're interested in operations or you're interested more in quality and safety. You can become the chair of a emergency department. You can become a chief medical officer, right? You can become a chief safety officer. I'm pretty sure that's what Hope's title is. But you can, right? And you can sort of mold it. I think that was the one thing that I learned about admin. I was like, oh, wow, there are actually so many different routes within administration that you can take depending on what your interest is. You can become a vice chair of operations. That's kind of what we have at our program. And she's an incredible female physician who is, the chair of all of the chair of operations of all of our emergency departments. And so, yeah, I think it really is great because you can sort of mold a career, which I didn't really appreciate very early on in admin.
I was just going to piggyback off of Stephanie's comments. I think that's the really awesome part of admin is there's a niche for everybody. I think one of the things that we haven't mentioned, there's also informatics. So if you were interested in being like a chief medical informatics officer, like that's a huge job and a very skilled person needs to do that. So the possibilities are really kind of endless in admin. And then you can also make that fit whatever your life is. Like you can make it work for you.
Thank you so much. I want to definitely discuss, Dr. Gopal, you had mentioned that it wasn't even something that you were necessarily thinking about, and you kind of came to it late. Do all of you think that some residencies, maybe they don't emphasize this fellowship enough? We hear a lot about ultrasound, we hear a lot about all the various other fellowships. And even in my own school, I don't feel like administration itself is not emphasized as much. Could you guys comment on that?
Yeah, happy to. I think now, with ACGME guidelines, actually every resident throughout residency should have some component of administration quality, especially like patient quality and safety experience. And so it can come in different ways, like, residents reviewing an M&M, going through an M&M, or, sitting on the continuous quality improvement committee, or even like working emergency department and like finding that, there's really an inefficiency here. I want to, do this to change it. And so that becomes like, their scholarly projects for residency. But I think, those are all great ways to get involved. But one of the best ways, I think, is, getting involved with national organizations like ACEP as well as AAM, like the EM organizations, because that's, if you sit on a committee, so for example, SAM RAMS, and SAM, we have like, the Clinical Operations Administration Committee. And so by simply sitting on that, even if you're curious, there'll be projects that come up, and before you know it, you're kind of like involved on something. And that will like, really help show like whether you're like, that's something that makes you happy, and helps you get excited about what you do. And so it's like really great way to get your feet wet. So I would say, getting involved is definitely like a good way to have a barometer and gauge of whether this is something you enjoy.
I agree. And I think sometimes there's a lot of variability in a lot of programs in terms of, I guess, how they view admin. And I think, every program is very different. And sometimes admin can get a bad rap just, as an entity. And I think in the programs that kind of have that view, I think that just means that if this is something that you're interested in, it just means that you have to, I guess, be a little bit more proactive in terms of like searching out projects and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that it's like, not a possibility at all. I think it's something that, for example, in our residency, I don't think a lot of people necessarily went into admin fellowships off the bat. But then, our year 4 people or 5 people went into admin fellowship. So it's like definitely super variable. And so I think that as long as it's something that you want, like Wendy was saying, finding the opportunities, and it can be in your own hospital, or, there are a lot of ways. I did a lot with EMRA through ACEP, and I got involved in kind of being a liaison to different ACEP committees, and I still serve on some of those ACEP committees. And that was a great experience to, kind of get involved that way, and a very low lift way to do that. And so one that I would recommend.
Thank you so much for talking about that. All of you had also mentioned the importance of mentorship and networking. Could you please expand on some of the opportunities that your fellowships are providing you in regards to that?
Yeah, I can start with that one. In terms of networking, the way our fellowship is structured, we have a curriculum over the 2 years where we have a fellowship seminar that happens twice a month. It's every the first and third Tuesday of every month. And so it's a curriculum series, and we cover different things. Like sometimes we'll have topics on patient experience or quality and, quality one day, safety the other. But we also have different leaders come and speak with us at these seminars. So it's a great way to, and it's a very small group, which is amazing to talk to. I mean, we talked to, Eric Way, who's the CMO of H&H, Nate, sorry, I might be saying his wrong title. I apologize, but, or Nate Link, who I know is definitely the CMO at Bellevue. So, you speak with all of these, like have one-on-one conversations where you can ask them questions about their journey. And so it really does provide direct access to leaders in emergency medicine and also not in emergency medicine. Nate Link is an internal medicine doctor who's a leader in the hospital. And so you get to ask them questions, build those connections, network with them later on. And you'll find that you will run into these people at conferences. And then I think the other thing that I'll say is that they also, the program directors for our fellowship, serve as mentors. And so they will sit down and talk to you about the different job opportunities that are available to you and counsel you right on those job opportunities when you're thinking about taking them, or how do you advocate for certain things that you want in your job. Building your resume as an administrative fellow is way different than what your resume looked like when you were applying or when you were a resident. So really just a lot of different aspects of helping you like get the job that you want to secure after fellowship. That's what my experience was at NYU.
I can talk about at King's, my fellowship experience in terms of mentorship. The really fantastic part of being a fellow is that you get to be in the room when all these conversations are happening. So, we're working on solving issues with hospital flow, and you're the fellow. So you get to go and sit in the room with the CEO and the CMO, and you come to interact with these people and learn that they're just regular people. And, they remember you and they take you under their wing. And I think doing a fellowship makes those things so much easier to achieve. It's totally possible without a fellowship, but I think just going through the format of fellowship, it's the path of least resistance, and it gives you just a wealth of opportunities that you don't have to really kind of create for yourself. As a result of just some of these interactions, I've been able to go to different conferences with several of the C-suite members, which I wouldn't have had that opportunity otherwise. And, you can bounce ideas off of them, projects, and they see what you're interested in and give you advice and tips. And to me, that makes the fellowship experience invaluable.
I think the kind of networking aspects and mentorship aspects are kind of twofold when you consider also having a degree program in there, which I think has been really nice as well. In the hospital setting at our fellowship, we've kind of in your first year, you get put on a lot of projects that are, both internally in the Department of Emergency Medicine, but also through the entire hospital as well. And so that gets you kind of acquainted with other people through the hospital. And then kind of that carries through your second year. And then by the time you're a second year, then, people come to you with projects and things like that. And then you're able to kind of have that network already. You kind of know who to talk to, who to reach out to. And you're able to kind of develop pathways yourself and, create projects for yourself because you already have these networks that are already built and you're kind of already on autopilot by virtue of having already built these networks, which is really, really awesome. And I think, just by having a fellowship, you kind of have that mentorship that's already built in for you. People consider you, because you're the fellow, people want you to succeed. And I think that's a huge thing that's not to be underestimated because, you're kind of a reflection of your institution. If you choose to stay at your institution or if you choose to leave. And I think that is invaluable. And then beyond that, if you do have a degree program at your fellowship, there's just so much mentorship and so much networking through the degree program as well. You meet so many people from so many walks of life. At Yale, we're part of an executive MBA that while we're put in the healthcare track, we also there's a sustainability track and an asset management track. And the first year we take all of our classes together, and second year we have I'd say half of our classes together, and then the other half are within our tracks. So, and you're all one big cohort. So you meet people that are, working at Disney, working at Spotify, working at all these different places. And you're, it's just such a different world. And so you kind of like have conversations and they teach you different ways to think about problems that I've kind of taken back to how I think about problems in the emergency department. And that's been very gratifying and very interesting too.
Yeah, I really want to echo what Monisha just said. Just being part of, the school management, it kind of opens up like a whole new ecosystem of like, people that you exchange ideas with. And it's so awesome kind of bring things and that best practices from other industries to the healthcare industry and being exposed to that. Because that I think like some of the conversations I had with, my classmates, my TAs, and my professors have definitely like translated into projects here that are ongoing within like emergency medicine, and that cross pollination of ideas, it's like really exciting, and that's like really how innovation happens. And so I agree with what Monisha said, and also like what Stephanie and Hope said, within the kind of emergency medicine admin fellowship, we're like a big specialty, but also a small specialty in a way, in that, if I reach out to Stephanie or Hope, it's like, hey, what's going on at your site? Like, what are you doing differently? I think that cross peer mentorship is also really important, because one of the ways we can improve, patient care and clinical operations is also sharing what has worked in the past, what hasn't worked. And I think that's really cool, like, being part of this community.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of out of the box thinking that you guys really get to bring into your fellowships. And that's just a lot of that stuff we think about with emergency medicine. Physicians in general, we tend to try and think outside of the box to try and help some of our patients. So it's great that you guys are also getting that in your fellowship. What are some unique challenges that you face in your fellowship or in medicine administration? Is there anything you guys would like to talk about in regards to challenges that you guys would face?
I'm not quite sure. I assume are the audience members mostly like residents, medical students? Because I think like part of, applying to the admin fellowship, because there's so many like different formats of administration fellowships, it's kind of hard to figure out, like, I think initially when applying to fellowships, like, when do I submit my application? Because every program is a little different, and it's also a little different on like, how you submit your application to the advanced degree versus to the application itself. So maybe it might be helpful to kind of for us to talk a little bit about our own experiences, because they're kind of quite different. So with the Yale program, the administration kind of advanced degree is integrated to your administration fellowship. So that decision on whether you get into fellowship when you get into fellowship, you would have also gotten into the advanced degree. And I know this is kind of different for each site, which is why I wanted to go over this. But so in our case, when you apply to the Yale School of Management, you also need to, do your tests. And so that includes the GMAT or the executive assessment, EA. And the EA exam is what a lot of the admissions kind of counselors recommend these days. So the EA is essentially like a 16-minute test, and it tests you on like different topics, like your math, your critical thinking, and like your reading comprehension. And so, usually like the timeline is like in the spring, you do your EA, in the kind of summer, you network and then submit your applications. And then the fall is when, you apply. And a lot of times I think because, folks don't understand that they need to get this executive assessment kind of like testing done, they miss out opportunities on applying to some of the programs, which is why, for folks attending today, I really wanted to highlight that and, plan ahead, get the exams done so that you don't really limit your options of which admin fellowship programs that you can do.
I think that's a great thing to highlight, Wendy. And I think kind of along with that is don't hesitate to reach out to places. If you're interested in a place, or if you're even considering a place, just, go on their website, look at, contact information, and just reach out. Because I think it can be kind of daunting initially when you're, you're basically cold calling a lot of different places because it's not like residency where there's, a match with like a dedicated application. This is a very, it's like sometimes on a rolling basis. It's a very kind of like illusory process. So make sure that, the kind of earlier that you get in contact with places, the more established relationship you have, I think the better it bodes. And that also is what clued me in, as Wendy said, to be able to get that test done. I actually did not know that the EA existed, and so I took the GMAT. Don't do that. Definitely take the EA. Yeah, learn from my lesson. But then make sure that when you're contacting these places, you find out when their applications are generally when they open up and when they start accepting applications, because also, as I mentioned, a lot of them, they may be either on rolling deadlines or they might have, a certain day by which they'll interview everybody and they'll kind of make their decision a couple weeks earlier. And so it's kind of good to get all of your letters, all of your application materials in as early as possible. And so having that stuff already is just all for the better. And so if this is something that you're considering, start thinking about who you might want to write your letters. People who can attest to things that you've done in the admin world, as well as people who can attest to your clinical prowess would probably be a good way to start.
And I'll just add, I would recommend making a spreadsheet. I think Monisha and I shared spreadsheets with each other, but make a spreadsheet of the program, the deadline, what degree is associated with the program, what the requirements are for that degree, because they are all so different. And some of them are not accepting applicants, but then funding comes through and then they change their mind and they're accepting applicants. So that's where you really do have to email them and reach out and like ask the question, because their websites are not always updated. I also learned that the websites are not updated and reflect if they're accepting applicants or not. So it really is, it's not a streamlined process and every program does it differently. And so if you have a question about it, email the program directors or the program coordinators to ask them, and then keep a spreadsheet to keep track of everything, because it's a lot of different deadlines to keep to follow, honestly. Yeah.
Stephanie, what was the application process like for you? Did you have to apply to your advanced degree separately, or how did that work?
Yeah, so yeah, I should talk about that because I did not do an MBA. I did an MPA, which is a master's in public administration. So it's a different degree. You do not need to do the GRE for it, or I don't even know what that other test is that you guys are talking about. But and I specifically picked that because I did not want to take the GRE, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, so I didn't have to do that, and really they like accept your MCAT score from a million years ago, which was great. And you have to apply and you have to get in, but you're all obviously very accomplished people, right? Like you're residents and you went through med school, and so I feel very confident that you all would get accepted to MPA school if you chose to do it. But you do still have to do the application. You have to write the personal statement or the essay about why you want to go to MPA school, and you have to be aware of the deadlines and make those deadlines. But it's not as intense as applying for the MBA.
I can just give my 2 cents. My MBA is through the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. So it is completely like virtual. The application process was, I guess, very similar to STEPS, where you just apply and, we're all accomplished people at this point in time. So it was very straightforward for getting in. And so from that perspective, it was not as crazy, but I know with applying to other programs, they had like a lot of specific things that you had to do in order to even qualify to put your application completely through. So definitely pay attention to those things.
I know that SAEM and EMRA have pages describing the various fellowships that we have. Were there any other sources that you guys used in order to look at the different programs, what each offered, or did you go to each program individually to try and figure out which one was best for you?
I think for me, speaking with the most recent fellow who's gone through it, they know so much information. So actually, when I was going through the process, I relied a lot about, I'm putting this way because Monisha is like this way on my screen, but I actually talked to her a lot about her experience, and both like at Yale and like through applying to other programs.
I basically picked apart the website in great detail. And then usually there was someone that I was able to reach out to and just get the lay of the land. And that was the way I found it to be helpful.
Yeah, same. I tried to use like the ASAP fellowship finder, and they had some fellowships on there that you could look up, but really for any specifics, it's like combing through the website and then emailing any specific questions that you have to either a program coordinator or one of the administrators.
I basically did the same thing, but one thing I would note is a lot of these kind of collating websites, a lot of the specific fellowships, they don't email SAEM and ASAP that frequently to update the information. So if you're interested in a specific place, it's a great place to know whether or not a place has a fellowship, but then I would still go to that institution's website to check, and get like the information on like who the fellowship director is, what their email is, what the program coordinator's email is, that kind of stuff. Because a lot of the emails and stuff were a little bit out of date, just because I think, the programs have to push that information to SAM, and I don't think that happens with that much regularity. So I would just make sure that, you're being conscientious, and to that end, the websites also have a lot more information about, what the degree programs hold, what requirements you'll need for each of the applications, like how many letters you'll need, because that varies per institution, how many, like the schools, how many, like whether or not you'll need the EA, things like that. So each website also has a lot of great information.
And also, since we're approaching SAEM, there is the fellowship fair. So that's another resource that you could go to. I know ASAP also has the EMRA fellowship fair as well. So all really great resources. And of course, I think a lot of my co-panelists talked about this already, like at these national organizations, a lot of, faculty member are really open to talking about their experiences. And personally too, when I'm at the conferences, if anyone ever has any, questions at all about my experience as a fellow, I'm always happy, for a quick coffee chat, things like that. So, flag people down at these conferences.
And I just wanted to pause momentarily. I'm asking some questions of our panelists, but if any of our residents that are currently watching, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat, and we can definitely verbalize it and have them ask as well. Sometimes we just come up with questions as they're saying something and you just want to know the answer, and we are more than happy to have them answer that, just as an FYI, okay? So we'll continue to move on. So emergency medicine, our life can be very demanding. We have a lot of shift work. We have a lot of life stressors. Speaking as a resident myself. So what strategies do your programs offer to support your work-life balance? Because we just in this world of post-COVID and wellness, that is a huge topic for us to know. What are your fellowships helping with that?
I think one really nice thing for us is that all of our like class time is baked into our schedule, and it is 100% guaranteed. And so we have class every other Friday and Saturday, and that's something that is like very, very protected and very like held sacred for us. Nobody expects anything of us. Nobody even like talks to us on those days. And so that's something that's like very well respected for us. And that was like a huge thing going for my wellness, because that also meant that like Friday nights I could just like hang out with my classmates and not have to worry about like, going to a meeting, like, having like the tail end of a shift, or even on Saturday evenings, like going to a shift or anything like that. I think that was kind of one of the biggest things. We also get a lot of requests for, admin and meeting time. And that has been a huge help as well, because we have kind of like scattered meetings, and as your admin responsibilities increase through the second year of fellowship, that's something that becomes more important as well. And so having protected time for that has been very, very helpful, and a good way to help me kind of like juggle my life. Yeah.
That's huge what Monisha said, getting that protected time to, focus on your advanced degree, but then also get protected time to participate in all the admin meetings. Just something else that I really enjoy, at least within our department, is that they are very supportive of us going to conferences. And so it's a nice bonding experience when you go with your section and go with your department to these like various experiences. I know, Monisha, you were recently at the a medical director conference, so that sounds really fun. I want to do that too in the future.
And I'll just add, I think something that you should ask about definitely is what the clinical requirement is for the fellowship. I think that has a lot to do with it. So our clinical requirement in fellowship is like 16 hours a week, 52 weeks, I can't remember, out of the year. But if you kind of say, okay, so that's working 2 shifts a week while being in school. Different programs do different things. And so I would recommend that you look into that and see what the clinical requirement is, the school requirement, right, and the administrative requirement, because you're managing, you're going to be balanced. And I think you just want to make sure that you go to a place that one prioritizes your education and administration over the clinical shifts are important. You have to be on the ground, you have to be working, right, to be able to do the administrative work. But I think you want to make sure that you're going to a place that understands that the administrative experience and the education is important, and allows that flexibility with scheduling so that you are able to go to your classes and make all these important administrative meetings. Yeah, and I think you also want to just look to make sure that that culture exists, period, because you'll be an administrative fellow. But I think most of these, the way at least it's structured at NYU, is that you're considered faculty. And so you get the same benefits that all other faculty get. And so one of the things that I looked at was like, well, how does scheduling work for faculty and time off request, right? And like vacation time, all of those things are wellness, and your maternity leave policy. I looked into all those things before going, because the same way they apply to faculty is the same way that they apply to you as a fellow. And so please do look into those things. They're super important.
I can only agree with everything that's been said already. I think knowing your clinical requirement is a big deal. Also remembering you're new attending for most people, and like just having the space to like be able to process some of those things and feelings while balancing school and trying to be an administrator. I think you have to just really gauge the programs as you're applying to figure out, is this a place that's going to be really truly supportive. I think also just, you're, like I said, you're gauging the people you're going to work with. Are these people going to be supportive of me? Is there flexibility with taking a meeting from home one morning if, life happens or whatnot? And I think those are the like small details that can kind of make or break your experience.
Now that you are in the position that you're in, the fellowship that you're in, if you could give some advice to some of the current residents and residents who will likely see this recording, what would be your top 3 questions that you would ask during an interview to a program? Now that you're where you're at, what do you think you would ask now, and what's important to you now?
That's a great question. I think, one question to ask is, where your alumni like end up after fellowship. And I think based on the geography of where they end up, the diversity of the positions they're in, it kind of gives you a better understanding of like, how their fellowship experiences provide them kind of the skill sets and also the CV to be in the positions that they are. So I would definitely, ask about the alumni network.
I think that's an excellent question to ask. I think another question that I often asked was what sorts of projects the fellows did, because that gave me a kind of idea of what the department prioritized and what they prioritized for the fellows specifically, because that kind of shaped how I thought my education would be. Because if they kind of had a certain lean to them, I would see whether it aligned with my interests or it didn't, or if I thought it would kind of help me develop new areas of interest or not.
Yeah, I think I also asked about their flexibility in terms of what projects you were allowed to work on. This is sort of similar to what Monisha said, what projects you could work on as a fellow, mostly because I had interviewed at a place that I won't mention, but a CMG backed place that had very specific requirements for their fellows and the projects that they wanted them to work on. And, the flexibility just wasn't for me. But I think it's important to ask that, do you have a very strict, streamlined flow of what you want your fellows to do and the projects that they're existing projects and you already have them in mind and that's what you want me to work on? Or is there some flexibility? Can I come up with projects on my own? Can I do things that I'm interested in? I think is important.
I think I liked Wendy's question about asking where people have gone after doing the program, what sort of alumni exist. I think the other thing I realized with interviewing is not everyone is on the website. So if the website was like not as diverse gender wise or other with, I would ask like, so like how many women are actually like on your leadership team, and like, is there a reason why there's not as many, or like I just tried to feel them out a little bit, because me as a female now entering this situation, like I need to know how comfortable am I going to be and what potential barriers may exist.
Thank you so much. I thought that was a pretty important question for our residents to try and gauge, and gives them an idea as to what they can go into and when they start to try and look at these programs. I believe Joyce asked a question on the chat, and I'll just read it out loud. What is something you wish you would have done or happy that you did do spring or summer before applying to your admin fellowship?
I think for me personally, it was talking to the fellows at the programs that I was interested in. The kind of spreadsheet that Steph was talking about, we had kind of like made a list of like programs that I, kind of like thought were interesting, or ones that I was potentially interested in. And the ones that I could kind of get in contact with, I spoke to some of their their current fellows at the time, and that was a really great way to, or their like past fellows, and that was a really great way to kind of get an idea of, I guess, truly what they thought of the fellowship, whether or not they were happy, whether, and obviously everyone kind of has either like rosy retrospection or maybe not. They obviously have a biased view of their own program, but I think it gave like a very honest view of what kind of things they did in the fellowship itself, and not from like a program standpoint, but from an individual standpoint. And I thought that was very helpful when choosing a program.
I think something I worked on doing was just thinking of how my CV was going to look when I applied, and trying to bring some of those projects or papers like into a more completed state. So that way they were going to be talking points. I knew that for me, the question was more fellowship or not after doing the 5 years of residency. I was leaning more towards yes, doing it, but I still had to like take some time to get convinced into it. And I think taking some time to really reflect, like, you've done all this work, let's bring it to a termination so you can talk about it, apply. This seems like the path you're going to go into. I think taking that personal time helped before applying.
Yeah, I think I'll just echo, before interviewing and before applying, I really, a lot of people will ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And how does that connect to your CV? I've had that happen a lot. Like, the work that you're doing, what do you envision yourself? And so I had to like really sit down and sit with that for a little bit and think about, well, all of the work that I've done has typically, they've been things that I've been passionate about, and how do I envision myself? And sometimes you don't have an answer, and that's okay to say that, right? You can say, I don't know exactly what the job title is, but this is what I want to do, and maybe I can create that job title. And sometimes that's the answer. And so, but really to sit with that and think about it before you apply and before you interview.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that's been said. For me, I feel like when Steph and Monisha mentioned that they have lists, so creating that list of just knowing what the deadlines are kind of gave me a sense of peace, and that, yes, I can do this. Like, I won't miss any deadlines. So just creating that spreadsheet, knowing what the deadlines are, knowing the requirements, and having a box where I can check off once I've completed it. I think that gave me some sense of like stability and control through all of this.
Oh, can I add one more thing? Something that will happen to you. I don't know if this happened to you guys, but when you're applying to fellowships, it's also sort of on rolling like admission. And so you will get acceptances from some fellowships and, while waiting to hear from others, and people will give you deadlines to reply to things by, which is a little tricky, right? I think my recommendation would be, I'm very happy with my fellowship, but I think it's okay to ask for more time to decide. I think someone a program that values you, right, will appreciate that if you're doing it in a meaningful way, and you really do just need time to weigh your options. But that will inevitably happen to some of you, where you get acceptances from some places and not others, and you're waiting to hear back. And talk to your mentors about that in real time, because it's a very hard decision to make, and you've never done it before, so you can feel like you're sort of flying blind. But don't be afraid to say, I need a little bit more time. Can you give me a longer deadline, or more time to make this decision? Because it's a big decision.
That's definitely pretty key, Stephanie. I'm glad you brought that up, because too, like, a lot of times, like, one program sometimes will just give you a couple days to respond, and in which case you still haven't interviewed at like another program. So also keeping like an open line of communication with the different fellowship directors, I thought was really helpful, because more oftentimes than not, they all talk. And so when they know what's going on with other offers coming out, they tend to figure it out. It's kind of like a crazy process, but it works out.
And to kind of echo what they're saying, kind of, if there's a program that you're really interested in, that you're kind of in the earlier stages in, but you've received an acceptance for another one that, you're excited about, but you'd be more excited about a different one, other than asking for the extra time from the first one, kind of being very honest with the other one and saying, like, I'm incredibly interested in your program, and I understand that, you guys haven't come to a decision yet, but I do have another offer on the table. I think that's something that's completely okay to say.
That's very important to verbalize out loud, because I feel that really empowers us to help make our decision. And, when you're first graduating from medical school, you just want to match somewhere. You're just like, somebody please take me. But now this makes it feel like you have a good, like, you can put your finger on what kind of path you want to go, and you have that ability to kind of verbalize that and make that happen. So that, I think that I just want to emphasize, it's very important for us to understand that we can ask for more time, especially if that's a program that we'd be more interested in, or we want to hear more about. So just a foot stamp or foot stomp, that I should say. We have another question in the chat from Joyce again. Thank you, Joyce. How did you all decide to do admin in a more academic site versus more county, especially different hospital types within different systems?
So for me personally, I, along with some of the other people here, I did residency in a very county place. And so I think one of the things was, I thought it'd be interesting to see more of the academic kind of environment. But I think, kind of apart from that, abstracting it a little bit, for me, it was more about the fellowship itself than the location. And that kind of changed it. It was kind of about the experience, the degree program that it had, and the fellows themselves, the kind of work they were doing. Because for academic versus county versus community, a lot of that is within like the emergency medicine work itself. And I think for that, like, a lot of it, like, emergency medicine is emergency medicine, and I think I'm okay with, working in a lot of different settings for a couple of years. And I think that that's totally fine. And I think it's also important to kind of experience a diverse set of environments, not only clinically, but also administratively, because there are a lot of different ways to do things. And so that was also kind of like part of the consideration. So yeah, all in all, it was basically about the fellowship program itself that really kind of like guided my decision more so than academic. But I will say, after making that choice, after being in this program, I've kind of like grown to enjoy research in a way that I did not quite expect to.
I can offer a contrasting view. From training in a county place and staying in a county place for fellowship, my perspective was more on the job I wanted after fellowship. And so I really wanted to stay at county and like sort of create that network for myself to be able to like go up in the ranks there eventually. And so I do I think retrospectively looking back, I do appreciate there is a skill set to be learned from going to a different place, seeing how it's done, and then also coming back and implementing those things there. But I think when I was deciding, I wanted a specific job, and that fueled the fellowship. And I also thought that at that time, the situation was like ripe for change with like transition of different leaders and whatnot. And so those were very positives that made me want to stay at county.
Yeah, and I'll say same thing. I probably was a little bit more similar to Monisha's mindset at the time, having trained in a county place. I felt that I wanted to experience something different, and I would say because I had more uncertainty about what I wanted to do afterwards. Then I think if you're very forward thinking the way Hope was and saying like I think I want to stay here and plan this out for myself, that's like excellent. But I think if you're a little bit unsure and maybe you want to have a different experience from what you had in residency, then maybe it is a good place a good decision to go to a different place. You know, at NYU, we have both academic and county. It's NYU and Bellevue Hospital, which is the county hospital. And so we have 3 program directors, 2 of whom are NYU based, and then 1 who is county based. And so for me, that flexibility, I was like, oh, this has everything I could want because I don't quite know what I want. And so you have the opportunity to really hone in on one of the more academic sites if you want. But Bellevue is also, I'm saying it's not academic, but it is academic. It's an academic county hospital. And so you could work in a county setting if you want to administratively and have that experience working with admin there, or you could work in the very nice fancy hospital, or you could work in the community hospital. And so the variety of clinical sites and how admin works at the various clinical sites was something that I've grown to appreciate. And if you can find that, and if that's what you want, I think it could be a good idea.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I feel like I'm similar to Hope in that I was at an academic place, stayed at the academic place because I did see areas that I wanted more exposure to. So for example, Yale has a huge health network. And as a resident, it felt like I was involved with many projects that were network wide. And so as a fellow this year, you know, I've been involved in care pathways that applied, you know, across network as well as consult dashboards that also apply to cross network. And so I feel like there are opportunities that I was still growing and learning. And so, and of course, like, you know, with all the infrastructure already at the fellowship, that was kind of one of the main reasons I decided to stay.
I think we have time for one more question. We're almost at the hour mark. I think if we go a little bit over, that's okay, especially just some of the great conversation we're having. I want to just give an opportunity to any of the residents that are currently on. If you have a question right now, please unmute yourself and please ask. This will be our last question. If not, I do have one more question, but I'll give you guys a quick second and I'll pause if anyone has anything to say.
I have a question. I think Stephanie touched on it, but kind of being asked about what your future career looks like and kind of broadening that because you can go higher than just department level. I'm kind of getting stuck in the point where I don't know. And I'm still saying that I want to like explore department level, hospital level. Did you run into that during interviews or application? And did you feel like that was an issue to say, like maybe this, maybe that, I want to get more experience? Or did you feel like it was helpful to kind of do a lot of more of that exploring during residency and have a firm answer?
I guess I'll share a little bit. My opinion is I don't think anyone expects you to know that answer definitively. You know, if someone does, I don't know, you'd be really, really far ahead. But maybe Monisha and Wendy and Hope can speak to this. But, you know, I went in having a vague sense, right, of what the jobs available to me were. And I think you should know some of those titles. Honestly, like if you're going in, you should know like kind of what a medical director is, right? Or that there is a chair of the department. Like you should know those things and be able to speak to them a little bit because those are people that you should have theoretically interacted with during residency. So I would have some semblance of that, but no one like expects you to be an expert on what like climbing the administrative ladder is like and knowing the exact role that you want and how that is supposed to look. So I think you you do your best to sort of verbalize that based on, and you can talk to other administrators too about that and say, and ask them what their experiences are in the hospital. Mentors that you've picked up, ask them what their role is, and sort of inquire about that more so you can speak to it with some background knowledge. But I think having it like fleshed out completely, at least from my interviews, that was thankfully not the expectation.
100% agree with Stephanie. I think one of the things that I often said during the interviews was that my hope during the fellowship was to be able to kind of gain enough experience in the different areas of admin to be able to hone that idea to understand what I wanted to do in the future, whether that meant hospital administration or department administration, and what kind of 10, 5, 10, 20-year goals I wanted to make. And so that was kind of the point of the fellowship itself. And that seemed to be a satisfactory answer.
Yeah, and in addition, I feel like a lot of kind of activities I was involved with as a medical student resident happened because I kept an open mind, and that kept me where that brought me to where I am today. And talking with a lot of like senior faculty, they also kind of had a lot of things cooking, and they didn't really know that one day they'll be like an expert in XYZ, but on reflecting back, they were like, oh, like it makes sense because I had all these interests, and it only kind of made sense after. So in the similar vein, it's like I'm keeping an open mind. I am excited to, challenge myself and participate in all these activities, because one day, you never know what's gonna, stick, and you never know, like maybe you'll create like your own niche. But I think deep down, it's like I want to make a positive impact in my patients' lives and in the working environment of physicians, PAs, and like healthcare, providers. And so I think with those goals, I'm hoping that that takes me to where I want to be with the skills that I gained during fellowship.
I completely agree with everything. I think having some idea of maybe what you want to do when you get to the end is helpful. Actually, something that I thought was like a very good quality when I had interviewed was I was all about talking about quality and safety. They're like, but you're going to learn how to do operations. And like, okay, I will learn how to do that. And, that was not something that I was like interested in going off the bat, but like the purpose of doing the fellowship is so that you do get the exposure to everything, because you don't know where life will take you, and you don't know what sort of roles you'll have to pivot into later. And so that's sort of been the experience I had.
Thank you all so much. This has been extremely informative. We have all very much appreciated this, and just the information and the pathways and just how we can actually try and apply to a fellowship for administration has been fantastic. I think, and I don't mean to speak for you, but I would assume that you guys would be happy to talk to anyone, any residents that would like to be like any more information. You can definitely reach out to them. So please reach out if you have any questions. I know that they would be happy to talk to you. And if anyone has anything else that they would like to say before we end, oh, you're welcome, Tristan, no problem.
And huge thanks to Dr. Laura Barrera for being the moderator. Applause.
Thank you, no problem. This is my pleasure. I learned a lot. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful Thursday and a fantastic weekend as it's coming up. Thank you so much. You have a good night. Bye.